I am Jessica, 34 years old, and after 5 long years of fertility struggles, I finally got pregnant. I planned the perfect surprise at Bella Luna, our special restaurant, hiding a gift box with my positive test in my purse. My heart was bursting with joy as I applied my lipstick that evening, completely unaware that within hours, my world would shatter. Before I could share my miracle, Ryan looked into my eyes and confessed he had been sleeping with my sister Brooke for months. The gift box stayed unopened in my purse as I walked out alone. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit subscribe if you want to hear how I rebuilt my life after the night that broke me. My story with Ryan began 12 years ago in graduate school at Boston University. I was pursuing my MBA in marketing while he was finishing his degree in architecture. We met during a campus fundraiser where I was coordinating the event and he had designed the stage. His confident smile caught my attention immediately, and by the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. 3 dates later, I knew he was special. Ryan was different from other men I had dated. He listened intently when I spoke about my dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. He shared his vision of designing sustainable buildings that would change cities' skylines. We both came from traditional families, but shared modern values about partnership and equality in relationships. After 2 years of dating, Ryan proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. The wedding was everything I had dreamed of, intimate yet elegant, with close family and friends celebrating our love. My sister Brooke, for years younger than me, was my maid of honor. She gave a beautiful speech about looking up to me her entire life and hoping to find a love like mine someday. The irony of those words would haunt me years later. The first 2 years of marriage were blissful. We bought a charming colonial house in a Boston suburb. Ryan joined a prestigious architecture firm while I climbed the ranks at a digital marketing agency. We traveled, renovated our home, and built a life that seemed perfect on the surface. When we decided to start trying for a baby on my 30th birthday, we were optimistic and excited about expanding our family. The first few months of trying were full of anticipation. I downloaded fertility apps, tracked my cycle meticulously, and read every book about conception. We approached it like any other goal in our lives, with determination and planning. Each month, I would hold my breath while taking pregnancy tests, only to face disappointment repeatedly. After a year with no success, the carefree attempts turned into scheduled intercourse and mounting pressure. Our doctor suggested basic fertility testing after 18 months of trying. The results showed minor issues on both sides, nothing catastrophic but enough to make conception challenging. I had mild endometriosis, while Ryan had slightly lower sperm motility than ideal. The doctor recommended lifestyle changes, supplements, and continuing to try naturally for another 6 months. When those 6 months yielded no results, we moved on to intrauterine insemination. 3 failed IUI cycles later, we graduated to in vitro fertilization. Each IVF cycle was an emotional and physical marathon. The daily hormone injections left my stomach bruised and my emotions raw. The egg retrievals were painful, and the 2-week wait after embryo transfers was psychological torture. Through it all, Ryan held my hand during appointments, administered injections when I couldn't, and dried my tears after each negative result. The financial strain was significant. Our insurance covered only a portion of the treatments, leaving us to pay thousands out of pocket. We dipped into savings, postponed vacations, and cut expenses wherever possible. Ryan took on additional projects while I worked overtime to afford the next treatment cycle. The stress infiltrated every aspect of our lives, from our careers to our social interactions. Despite the challenges, the fertility struggle initially strengthened our bond. We developed a special ritual of monthly dinner dates at Bella Luna, an Italian restaurant that became our sanctuary. No matter how difficult the month had been, we would dress up, order our favorite dishes, and remind ourselves that we were more than our fertility struggles. Ryan would raise his glass and toast, to us, no matter what, a phrase that became our mantra through disappointment. My relationship with Brooke had always been close despite our age difference. She was a free spirit who had moved between careers and relationships while I took a more structured path. As my fertility journey progressed, she became my confidant. I shared details of treatments with her that I was too embarrassed to tell friends. She brought me comfort food after difficult appointments and listened to my fears without judgment. I never imagined she would betray me so completely. Our parents, traditional and family-oriented, struggled to understand our fertility issues. My mother would call weekly asking for updates, unintentionally adding pressure with comments like, "Your cousin Jennifer just announced her third pregnancy." My father was more tactful but equally eager for grandchildren. Ryan's parents were similarly anxious, sending articles about natural fertility remedies and success stories of couples who conceived after adoption. After 3 failed IVF cycles, with our emotional reserves depleted and our savings dwindling, we made the difficult decision to take a break from active treatment. The constant cycle of hope and despair had taken its toll on our mental health. Ryan suggested we focus on enjoying our life together and let nature take its course. We agreed to 1 year without tracking, testing, or treatment to rediscover joy in our marriage beyond the pursuit of parenthood. The positive pregnancy test appeared like a mirage in the desert. It was a random Tuesday morning, 8 months into our treatment break. I took the test not because I had symptoms, but because my period was 3 days late, something that happened occasionally due to my endometriosis. I had grown accustomed to negative results, so when 2 pink lines appeared, I stared in disbelief. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, the plastic test stick in my trembling hands, afraid to move or breathe lest this moment prove to be a dream. After 5 minutes of staring at those lines, I took a second test from under the sink. Positive again. Still not convinced, I drove to the pharmacy in my pajamas and purchased 3 different brands of pregnancy tests. All positive. That afternoon, I called our fertility specialist's office and begged for an immediate appointment. The nurse, hearing the panic in my voice, squeezed me in that same day. The ultrasound confirmed what the tests had indicated. I was approximately 6 weeks pregnant, with a tiny gestational sac visible on the screen. The doctor cautioned that it was still early, but everything looked appropriate for the gestational age. Blood tests confirmed my hormone levels were rising appropriately. Sometimes when we stop trying so hard, nature surprises us, the doctor said with a smile. It was the miracle we had stopped believing was possible. I drove home in a state of euphoria mixed with terror. After years of disappointment, I was afraid to embrace the joy fully. I decided not to tell Ryan immediately, partly out of superstition and partly because I wanted to plan the perfect announcement. This was the moment we had been waiting for, and it deserved a celebration worthy of our struggle. Over the next 2 weeks, I secretly planned the perfect surprise. During lunch breaks, I visited baby boutiques, purchasing a pair of tiny white booties and a onesie that read "worth the wait." I found a wooden box with "Our Greatest Adventure" engraved on the lid, where I placed the positive pregnancy test, booties, and a card with the due date calculated by my doctor. I made a reservation at Bella Luna for our upcoming anniversary, requesting our usual table by the window. The restaurant held special significance beyond our monthly ritual. It was where we had celebrated our engagement, where we had comforted each other after failed treatments, and now where I would share the news that our dream was finally coming true. As the announcement day approached, I noticed subtle changes in Ryan's behavior. He worked later than usual, often coming home after I had gone to bed. His phone, previously left casually around the house, was now always in his pocket or face down on surfaces. When it chimed with messages, he would step into another room to respond. Once, I caught a glimpse of his screen and saw he had changed his password. These were red flags I might have questioned under different circumstances, but my mind was consumed with my secret and the upcoming revelation. Brooke's behavior changed simultaneously. My sister, who typically called several times a week, became elusive. She canceled our standing Sunday brunch twice in a row, citing work commitments despite being between jobs. When we did speak, her voice seemed strained, and she avoided asking about Ryan, unusual given her previous interest in our fertility journey. During a brief visit to my parents' home, my mother asked peculiar questions about my marriage. "Are you and Ryan doing okay?" "You know marriage takes work," she said while preparing dinner. When I assured her we were fine, she exchanged a look with my father that I couldn't interpret. At the time, I attributed their concern to the stress they knew we had been under with fertility treatments. I never suspected they might know something I didn't. The day of our anniversary arrived, and I spent hours preparing. I had my hair styled at a salon, chose a new dress that concealed my still flat stomach but made me feel beautiful, and packed the gift box carefully in my purse. I felt like I was carrying the most precious secret, a pearl growing from years of pain. As I applied my makeup, I imagined Ryan's face when he opened the box. Would he cry? Laugh? Both? I rehearsed capturing his reaction on my phone. After so much heartache, I wanted to document the moment our dream came true. I never imagined the evening would unfold so differently from my carefully crafted plan. Bella Luna was bustling when I arrived at 7:30 that evening. The hostess, Maria, greeted me with familiar warmth. "Your husband is already here," she said, guiding me through the dimly lit restaurant to our usual window table. The aroma of garlic and fresh bread filled the air, and soft Italian music played in the background. Crystal glasses and polished silverware gleamed under the soft lighting, and a small vase with a single red rose adorned our table, a special touch for our anniversary. Ryan stood as I approached, his face a mask I couldn't read. He kissed my cheek rather than my lips, an unusual greeting that sent a small ripple of unease through my excitement. He had ordered drinks already, another deviation from our routine. Instead of our celebratory Prosecco, a tumbler of whiskey sat before him, half empty. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes not quite meeting mine as I settled into my seat. The server approached immediately, asking for my drink order. "Just water for now," I replied, conscious of my hidden pregnancy. The waiter nodded and departed, leaving an awkward silence in his wake. Ryan fidgeted with his napkin, folding and refolding it with unusual precision. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to ease the tension. He answered with vague details about a project meeting, his voice monotone and distant. I reached for the bread basket, my fingers brushing the gift box in my purse. Should I give it to him now or wait until after dinner? The weight of my secret made casual conversation difficult. I decided to wait until after our appetizers, to build up to the moment gradually. The waiter returned with my water and took our appetizer orders. Ryan ordered for both of us without consultation, another break from our usual pattern of discussing the menu together. He requested more whiskey, his third by my count. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked, unable to ignore the growing discomfort. "You seem distracted." Ryan took a deep breath and set down his glass with determination. "Jessica, I need to tell you something before we go any further with this evening." His voice was steady but strained. My heart accelerated. Had he somehow discovered my pregnancy? Was this nervousness because he had planned his own surprise? "I should have told you weeks ago, but I couldn't find the courage," he continued, eyes now fixed on mine with an intensity that made me shift in my seat. "There's no easy way to say this." The server approached with our appetizers, but Ryan waved him away abruptly. "Give us a few minutes." The server retreated, confusion evident on his face. Ryan reached across the table for my hands, but I instinctively pulled them back, suddenly afraid of what was coming. The restaurant sounds faded into background noise as blood rushed to my ears. "I've been having an affair," he said, the words falling like stones into still water. "With Brooke. Your sister." Time seemed to stop. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "What did you say?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Brooke and I have been seeing each other for 6 months, he continued, words now tumbling out rapidly. It started after your third failed IVF. We were both drinking at your parents' Memorial Day barbecue. You had gone to bed early because you weren't feeling well. One thing led to another, and it just happened. The restaurant spun around me as Ryan's confession continued in excruciating detail. They had met in hotel rooms, at her apartment when her roommate was away, sometimes even in our home when I traveled for work. What began as a physical affair had evolved into something deeper. They had feelings for each other. They had discussed a future together. "We never meant to hurt you," he said, a phrase so absurd given the circumstances that I almost laughed. "But we can't keep living this lie. You deserve the truth." My hand instinctively moved to my still flat stomach, a protective gesture for the baby Ryan didn't know existed. The gift box in my purse felt like it was burning through the leather, a cruel reminder of the announcement that would never happen. "Say something, please," Ryan urged after minutes of my stunned silence. Around us, other diners had begun to notice our intensity. A couple at the next table whispered behind their menus, while a waiter hovered uncertainly nearby. I became acutely aware that my private nightmare was unfolding in public view. "How could you?" I finally whispered, my voice breaking. "With my sister? In our home." Ryan reached for my hand again, but I recoiled. It wasn't planned. We tried to fight it, but the connection was undeniable. The fertility treatments were putting so much pressure on us, and Brooke was there when I needed someone to talk to. "So this is my fault?" I asked, anger beginning to replace shock. "Because I wanted a baby? Because I was going through medical procedures while you were sleeping with my sister?" "No, that's not what I meant," Ryan backpedaled, lowering his voice as heads turned toward our table. "I'm just trying to explain how it happened." The irony of the situation crushed me like a physical weight. Here I sat, finally pregnant after years of heartbreak, listening to my husband confess his betrayal with my own sister. The gift box remained unopened in my purse. In that moment, I made the decision not to tell him about the pregnancy. This revelation was no longer worthy of my joy. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my water glass. "I can't do this here. Not now." Without waiting for his response, I gathered my purse and coat, turned on my heel, and walked out of Bella Luna, the restaurant that had witnessed so many significant moments in our relationship, now including its destruction. Outside, the cool evening air hit my face, bringing with it a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. I had arrived at the restaurant as a wife excited to share life-changing news with her husband. I was leaving as a pregnant woman betrayed by the two people she trusted most, facing a future entirely different from the one she had imagined. The drive to Brooke's apartment passed in a blur. Streetlights streaked past my window like shooting stars as I gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. My phone buzzed repeatedly with calls from Ryan, which I ignored. My mind raced with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered, but I needed to hear from Brooke herself. Brooke lived in a modern apartment complex about 20 minutes from my home. I had helped her move in 2 years earlier, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs while she directed the furniture placement. We had christened the place with wine and takeout, laughing late into the night about childhood memories. The thought of those sisterly moments now turned my stomach. I parked haphazardly and practically ran to her building, punching in the entry code I knew by heart. When I reached her door, I didn't knock but instead used the spare key she had given me for emergencies. This certainly qualified. Brooke was curled on her couch in pajamas, scrolling through her phone. She looked up in shock as I burst through the door. "Jessica? What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Ryan told me everything," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. "At the restaurant. Just now." The color drained from her face as she set down her phone. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but then her shoulders slumped in resignation. "He wasn't supposed to tell you like that. We were going to sit you down together this weekend." "How considerate of you both to plan the destruction of my life so carefully," I spat, dropping my purse on her coffee table with a thud. 6 months, Brooke? In my house? In my bed? It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, standing to face me. Unlike Ryan, there were no tears in her eyes, no visible remorse in her expression. But once it started, we couldn't stop. There's something between us, Jess. Something real. Don't call me Jess, I snapped. You lost that right when you started sleeping with my husband. You were so consumed with getting pregnant, she continued, her voice taking on a defensive edge. Ryan felt neglected. He needed someone who could see him as more than a sperm donor. The cruelty of her words stunned me momentarily. So you're blaming me for your affair? For your betrayal? I'm not blaming you, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm explaining what happened. Ryan and I connected on a level that surprised us both. We tried to fight it, but the feelings were too strong. As she spoke, memories flooded back with new context. Brooke asking detailed questions about my work travel schedule. Her sudden interest in dropping by our house unannounced. The time I came home early from a conference to find her car in our driveway, her explanation that she was just dropping off some books suddenly hollow. How could you do this to me? I asked, my voice breaking. I trusted you with everything. My struggles, my fears, my marriage. I never meant to hurt you, she said, the standard line of betrayers throughout history. It just happened. Things like this don't just happen, Brooke. You made choices, hundreds of choices, every day for 6 months, to betray me. I noticed her phone light up with a text. Ryan's name flashed on the screen, followed by a message I could partially read. She knows. She left the restaurant. Are you? Seeing his name triggered something in me. I grabbed her phone before she could stop me. Give that back, she protested, reaching for it. I stepped away, scrolling through their message history with shaking hands. What I found devastated me anew. Plans for weekend getaways disguised as work trips. Intimate messages sent while I was sleeping beside Ryan. Photos I couldn't bear to look at closely. And most damning of all, conversations about their future together, about how and when to tell me, about what would happen after I got over the initial shock. You were planning a life together, I said, dropping the phone as if it had burned me. While I was planning fertility treatments, you were planning to take my husband. It wasn't like that, Brooke insisted, though the evidence clearly showed otherwise. We didn't want to hurt you, but we can't help how we feel. As I looked at my younger sister, fragments of our shared history flashed through my mind. Brooke throwing tantrums when I received attention at family gatherings. Brooke dating my high school boyfriend a week after we broke up. Brooke choosing the same college major, then dropping it when she couldn't outperform me. A lifetime of competition I had dismissed as normal sibling rivalry suddenly appeared as something darker. This isn't about Ryan, I realized aloud. This is about you and me. It always has been. For a brief moment, something like guilt flickered across her face before she composed herself. That's ridiculous. I love Ryan. You love taking what's mine, I countered. You always have. Before she could respond, my phone rang. Our mother's name flashed on the screen. I answered without thinking. Jessica? Are you okay? My mother's voice was tense. Ryan just called us. He's worried about you. Did you know? I asked, the question that had been gnawing at me since Ryan's confession. About Ryan and Brooke? The long pause before she answered told me everything. We suspected something, she finally admitted. Your father saw them together in a restaurant last month. They didn't see him, and he wasn't sure. We didn't want to upset you without proof. The betrayal expanded like a toxic gas, filling every corner of my life. And you didn't think to warn me? To protect me from this humiliation. We thought it might be a misunderstanding, she said weakly. And with all your fertility stress, we worried about how you would handle it. Brooke said it was nothing serious. My mother's words revealed where her loyalty lay. Not with me, her devastated daughter, but with protecting Brooke from consequences, as had been the pattern throughout our childhood. I'm pregnant, I said suddenly, the words escaping before I could reconsider. 5 weeks pregnant, after 5 years of trying. I was going to tell Ryan tonight. My mother gasped. Oh, Jessica. That's wonderful news. This changes everything. When Ryan finds out, I'm sure he'll end things with Brooke and come back to you. Her response infuriated me more than anything else that evening. Come back to me? Like he's doing me a favor? I don't want him back, Mom. He and Brooke have been sleeping together in my bed for 6 months while I injected myself with hormones and cried myself to sleep after negative pregnancy tests. But the baby needs a father, she insisted. Families should stay together. This isn't a family anymore, I said firmly. It's a betrayal, and I won't raise my child in that environment. I ended the call as Brooke stared at me in shock. You're pregnant, she whispered. Yes, I confirmed, a hand moving protectively to my stomach. Not that it matters to you or Ryan anymore. You've made your choices. I left her apartment without looking back, her calls of my name fading behind me. In my car, I finally allowed the tears to flow freely. The pregnancy I had dreamed of for years was now intertwined with the worst betrayal imaginable. Morning sickness had already begun to affect me, though until that moment, I had welcomed it as confirmation of my miracle. Now, I wondered how I would manage physical discomfort alongside emotional devastation. Within days, the family schism was complete. My father called to say he supported me but urged forgiveness for the sake of family healing. Several aunts took Brooke's side, suggesting that these things happen and that the stress of fertility treatments had pushed Ryan away. Only my cousin Melissa stood firmly with me, offering her guest room as a temporary sanctuary when I couldn't bear to return to the house I had shared with Ryan. For 2 weeks, I told no one else about the pregnancy, guarding it like a secret garden amid the scorched earth of my personal life. I needed time to decide my path forward without the opinions and pressures of others. The baby growing inside me deserved a mother who made decisions from strength, not from the reactive chaos of fresh betrayal. 3 weeks after the restaurant confession, I woke up on Melissa's sofa bed with a moment of disorientation before the reality of my situation came flooding back. Morning sickness hit immediately, sending me rushing to the bathroom. As I knelt on the cold tile floor, retching into the toilet while tears streamed down my face, I reached a breaking point. Enough, I whispered to my reflection in the bathroom mirror afterward. Enough crying. Enough hiding. Enough letting them determine my future. That morning marked the beginning of my counteroffensive. First, I called the top 3 divorce attorneys in Boston, scheduling consultations with each. Ryan had been calling and texting constantly, alternating between apologies, justifications, and pleas to talk in person. I had responded only with brief texts asking for space, but I knew a more definitive response was necessary. The first attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Diana Levinson, listened to my story without visible judgment. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, she explained, but infidelity can still impact property division and alimony in some cases. We need to document everything. She advised me to gather financial records, text messages, emails, anything that proved the affair. She also recommended I return to my house, explaining that abandoning the marital home could potentially weaken my position in property negotiations. He should be the one to leave, she said firmly. Not you. After the consultation, I drove to my bank and opened a separate account, transferring half of our joint savings. I then visited my OB/GYN for a prenatal checkup, confirming that despite the stress, my pregnancy was progressing normally. The doctor prescribed prenatal vitamins and warned about managing stress levels, a tall order given the circumstances. Armed with legal advice and medical reassurance, I returned to my house the following day while Ryan was at work. The familiar spaces felt alien now, contaminated by the knowledge of what had occurred there in my absence. I walked through each room slowly, reclaiming the territory with new eyes. In the master bedroom, I stripped the bed completely, stuffing sheets, pillowcases, and comforter into garbage bags to be donated or discarded. I couldn't bear to sleep on linens that might have witnessed their betrayal. When Ryan returned home that evening, he found me calmly preparing dinner in the kitchen. The shock on his face would have been comical under different circumstances. "Jessica," he breathed, dropping his briefcase. "You're home. I've been so worried. Can we please talk?" "We can," I agreed, my voice steady. "But first, I need to tell you something." I placed the spatula down and turned to face him fully. "I'm pregnant." His face cycled through emotions rapidly. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally a horrifying hope. "Pregnant? How? When?" "5 weeks," I said. "I found out the day before you confessed. I was going to tell you at the restaurant that night. I had a gift box with a test and baby shoes in my purse." Ryan staggered backward as if physically struck, collapsing onto a kitchen chair. "Oh my God," he whispered, face ashen. "Jessica, I am so sorry. If I had known..." "If you had known, what?" I interrupted. "You wouldn't have slept with my sister? You wouldn't have betrayed our marriage? Or you just would have told me differently?" He had no answer, just tears streaming down his face. "We can fix this," he finally said. "A baby changes everything. We can start fresh, go to counseling. I'll end things with Brooke completely." I laughed without humor. "You think I want to raise our child in a marriage held together by obligation, where their father stayed only because of a pregnancy? Where their mother can never trust their father again?" "What are you saying?" he asked, desperation evident in his voice. "I'm saying I've consulted with a divorce attorney," I replied calmly. "You'll be receiving papers soon. In the meantime, you need to find somewhere else to live. I'm keeping the house, at least until after the baby is born." "You can't just decide all this on your own," he protested. "That's my child too. And this house belongs to both of us. You decided the future of our marriage on your own when you started sleeping with my sister," I countered. "But you're right about one thing. This baby is yours too. You'll have visitation rights, and we'll work out a co-parenting arrangement. But our marriage is over." The weeks that followed were a bizarre dance of legal negotiations and pregnancy milestones. Ryan moved into a furnished apartment, but continued his campaign to reconcile. He sent flowers to my office, left handwritten letters of apology, even enlisted mutual friends to speak on his behalf. When those tactics failed, he switched to threats about fighting for full custody, followed by tearful apologies for the threats. Brooke made her own attempts at contact, ranging from defensive text messages, "You never appreciated what you had," to tearful voicemails, "I made a terrible mistake." I blocked her number after she suggested that the pregnancy was my attempt to trap Ryan. Our parents continued their pattern of enabling her, suggesting that my hormones were preventing me from forgiveness. Work became both a challenge and a sanctuary. Morning sickness made early meetings difficult, and the emotional strain affected my concentration. After a presentation where I completely lost my train of thought, my boss Patricia called me into her office. Expecting a reprimand, I was surprised when she closed the door and asked gently, "What's going on, Jessica?" "This isn't like you." Something about her genuine concern broke through my carefully constructed composure. I found myself telling her everything: the fertility struggles, the pregnancy, the betrayal, the divorce proceedings. When I finished, she handed me a tissue and shared that she had gone through a similar experience years earlier. "Take the time you need," she said. "Your projects can be redistributed temporarily. And when you're ready to come back full force, your position will be waiting." Her understanding gave me breathing room to focus on my health and legal situation without the added pressure of maintaining perfect work performance. The first ultrasound appointment arrived, a milestone I had dreamed of sharing with Ryan. Instead, I asked Melissa to accompany me. As the technician moved the wand across my still flat abdomen, the rapid whooshing sound of my baby's heartbeat filled the room. The technician pointed to the screen. "There's your baby." Strong heartbeat, measuring right on schedule. Tears filled my eyes as I stared at the tiny flickering light on the screen. In that moment, something shifted within me. The heartbeat, tangible evidence of the life growing inside me, became my North Star. Whatever chaos swirled around me, this baby represented hope and a future worth fighting for. That evening, I set firm boundaries with everyone in my life. I emailed my parents that I would not discuss Brooke or potential reconciliation with Ryan. They could either respect my decisions or have limited contact with me and their future grandchild. I informed Ryan that all communication would go through our attorneys unless it directly concerned the pregnancy. I told well-meaning friends that I needed support, not relationship advice. For the first time since the confession, I felt in control of my narrative. The path forward would be challenging as a single mother, but it was my path to determine. The baby's heartbeat had awakened my own heart from the stunned grief of betrayal, reminding me that I was stronger than the circumstances that had befallen me. 6 months into my pregnancy, my body had transformed completely. My rounded belly preceded me into rooms, and I had settled into a new routine that barely resembled my pre-confession life. The divorce proceedings had moved forward steadily, with property negotiations and custody discussions taking center stage. Ryan had finally accepted that reconciliation wasn't possible, though he remained adamant about being involved in our child's life. The house that had once been our shared dream home was now unmistakably mine. I had repainted the master bedroom, replaced furniture, and converted the planned home office into a nursery. Each change represented a reclaiming of space, a physical manifestation of my emotional journey toward independence. Finding a new apartment had been my first major step in rebuilding. I selected a sunny 2-bedroom in a family-friendly neighborhood, closer to my office and with excellent school districts. The process of furnishing it became unexpectedly therapeutic. Each piece I selected reflected my taste alone, without compromise or consideration for anyone else's preferences. The nursery became my favorite project, a peaceful space with soft green walls and woodland-themed decorations. My therapist, Dr. Winters, had been instrumental in my healing process. Our weekly sessions provided a safe space to process the complex emotions of simultaneously preparing for motherhood while dismantling my marriage. Grief and joy can coexist, she reminded me during a particularly difficult session. You're allowed to mourn your marriage while celebrating your pregnancy. Dr. Winters helped me recognize patterns in my relationship with Brooke that had preceded the affair, the subtle competition and underlying resentment that had existed since childhood. The affair was the earthquake, she explained, but the fault lines were there all along. This perspective helped me see that while the betrayal wasn't my fault, there were family dynamics I needed to understand to avoid repeating patterns in future relationships. Prenatal yoga classes introduced me to a community of women who knew nothing of my history and accepted me simply as an expectant mother. Among them, I found friendship without judgment or uncomfortable history. 3 women in particular, Allison, Tanya, and Jen, became my impromptu support system, meeting for weekend brunches and baby shopping expeditions. It was Allison who convinced me to join a childbirth education class, despite my hesitation about attending alone. You'll regret not being prepared more than you'll regret feeling awkward, she insisted. She was right, though the class brought an unexpected development into my life. Daniel Parker sat next to me on the first night of childbirth class, a tall man with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. When the instructor asked everyone to introduce themselves and their birth partners, I tensed, preparing for the awkward explanation that I was attending alone. "I'm Daniel, and I'm here solo," he said when his turn came, saving me from being the only one. My sister was supposed to be my birth partner, but she was deployed overseas last week. I'm having a daughter in 8 weeks through surrogacy. After class, we gravitated toward each other, comparing notes and sharing our unconventional paths to parenthood. Daniel was a widower whose wife had died of ovarian cancer 2 years earlier. Before her treatment, they had created embryos, and now he was fulfilling their dream of parenthood through a surrogate. His honesty about his fears of single parenthood made it easy for me to share parts of my story. We began meeting for coffee before classes, our friendship developing naturally around shared experiences of preparing for parenthood outside traditional structures. Daniel never pushed for details about my failed marriage, and I appreciated his respect for my boundaries. He became the first man since the confession that I felt completely comfortable around, perhaps because he wanted nothing from me except friendship. 7 months into my pregnancy, Ryan made his grand gesture. He arrived at my apartment unannounced, with an elaborate bouquet and a jewelry box containing a new wedding ring. "I know I made the biggest mistake of my life," he said, standing awkwardly in my living room. "But I've ended things completely with Brooke. I've been in therapy. I want to be a family, the 3 of us." 6 months earlier, these words might have swayed me. Now, they felt like lines from a movie I had already seen and didn't particularly enjoy. "Ryan, the divorce papers are nearly finalized," I said gently but firmly. "You'll always be my child's father, and we'll find a way to co-parent effectively. But our marriage is over. Is there someone else?" he asked, noticing the 2 coffee mugs on my counter. "Are you already seeing someone?" "No," I answered truthfully. "But even if I were, it wouldn't change anything between us. What you and Brooke did wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was 6 months of deliberate choices to betray me. I can forgive you for my own peace of mind, but I can't rebuild a marriage on that foundation." After Ryan left, I felt a surprising lightness. His visit had confirmed what I already knew. I had moved beyond the desire to reconstruct what was broken. Instead, I was building something new, something entirely mine. The relationship between Brooke and Ryan had collapsed under the weight of reality once the secret was exposed. According to mutual friends, they had tried to date openly after the confession but found that what had seemed exciting as a forbidden affair felt hollow as a legitimate relationship. Brooke had apparently moved to Chicago for a fresh start, while Ryan threw himself into work and preparation for fatherhood. Thanksgiving arrived, the first major holiday since the fracture in my family. My mother called repeatedly, insisting that family should be together for holidays. When I declined her invitation, explaining that I had already accepted Melissa's offer to host a small gathering, she was indignant. "Your father and I want to see you. We're about to be grandparents. You're welcome to visit me another day," I offered. "But I'm not ready to sit across a table from Brooke or pretend that everything is normal." "She's your sister," my mother said, as if that biological fact outweighed the betrayal. "Family forgives. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened," I countered. "It means finding peace despite what happened. I'm working on that, but I'm not there yet." Thanksgiving at Melissa's was the antidote to family tension. Her husband grilled instead of traditional roasting, we played board games instead of watching football, and no one asked uncomfortable questions or pushed for reconciliations. Daniel joined us, bringing homemade pies and easy conversation. Watching him chat with Melissa's children, I caught myself imagining him with our babies, a thought I quickly dismissed as premature. Work provided another anchor during this transition period. Patricia had kept her promise about my position, and I returned to full engagement with projects, my focus actually sharper than before. The company announced year-end promotions the week after Thanksgiving, and my name was on the list, along with a substantial raise that eased my concerns about single-parent finances. As my due date approached, practical matters dominated my attention. The divorce settlement gave me favorable terms, including the house, primary custody, and substantial child support. Ryan would have regular visitation rights once the baby was born. The legal clarity brought relief, establishing boundaries and expectations that would frame our co-parenting relationship. My birth plan took shape with Melissa as my primary support person and, surprisingly, Daniel as a backup if she couldn't be reached. My doctor had warned that stress could complicate labor, so I focused on creating the most peaceful environment possible for my baby's arrival. I packed and repacked my hospital bag, installed the car seat, and completed a hospital tour, each step bringing the reality of impending motherhood into sharper focus. The nursery stood ready, painted in soothing greens with woodland creatures adorning the walls. A rocking chair by the window overlooked the small garden, where I imagined sitting with my baby in the coming spring. The crib, assembled by Daniel during an afternoon that revealed his handyman skills, weighted with fresh linens and a mobile of stars and moons. In this room, I could almost forget the painful journey that had led to this point, seeing only the future that awaited. Lily Grace Williams entered the world after 18 hours of labor, screaming her arrival at 3:47 a.m. on a snowy February morning. The moment the doctor placed her on my chest, wet and wriggling, the room around me faded into insignificance. Her tiny fingers wrapped around my index finger with surprising strength, a metaphor for how completely she had already captured my heart. Melissa had been my rock through the entire labor, offering encouragement, ice chips, and fierce advocacy when medical staff suggested interventions I had hoped to avoid. Ryan arrived at the hospital shortly after Lily's birth, his face a mixture of awe and regret as he held his daughter for the first time. We managed a fragile civility for Lily's sake, a pattern that would define our interactions moving forward. The first weeks of motherhood passed in a blur of sleepless nights, nursing sessions, and discovering Lily's personality. She had my dark hair and Ryan's blue eyes, a physical reminder of our complicated connection. Postpartum recovery tested my endurance further, my body healing from birth while adapting to the demands of breastfeeding and minimal sleep. My mother arrived uninvited one afternoon, bearing casseroles and unsolicited advice. To my surprise, she came alone and made no mention of Brooke or reconciliation with Ryan. Instead, she focused entirely on Lily, marveling at her features and offering genuinely helpful baby care tips from her own experience. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. "I handled everything wrong," she admitted, the closest she had come to an apology. "I should have protected you better. Been on your side more clearly." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, not making it easier for her. But I added, "Lily needs a grandmother. We can build something new if you're willing to respect my boundaries." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'd like that." Ryan settled into a routine of weekend visits, arriving punctually each Saturday morning and returning Lily Sunday evening. He proved to be a dedicated father, if somewhat overwhelmed by the practical aspects of infant care. We communicated through a co-parenting app that kept our interactions focused on Lily's needs rather than our complicated past. 3 months after Lily's birth, Brooke sent a letter, not an email or text that could be easily deleted, but an actual handwritten letter on expensive stationery. I let it sit unopened on my counter for days, unsure whether reading it would help or harm my healing process. Eventually, curiosity won out. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness," she wrote. "What I did was unforgivable. There's no excuse, though I've spent months in therapy trying to understand why I would hurt the person who has always been my biggest supporter. The only explanation I can offer is that I've spent my life in your shadow, envious of your success, your stability, your seemingly perfect life. It wasn't about Ryan, not really. It was about taking something that was yours. I'm not asking to be part of your life again, or Lily's. I just wanted you to know that I understand the magnitude of my betrayal, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." The letter brought no satisfaction, no closure, just a sad recognition of the truth I had already intuited. I didn't respond, but I stopped actively avoiding mentions of Brooke in conversations with my parents. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, more an acknowledgement that she no longer held power over my emotional state. As Lily's first birthday approached, I realized with some surprise that an entire year had passed since the restaurant confession. The date itself, once seared into my memory with pain, now registered as just another day on the calendar. Out of curiosity, I made a reservation at Bella Luna, not with Ryan or any romantic partner, but alone, a symbolic reclaiming of a space that had witnessed both my greatest joy and deepest pain. The hostess, Maria, recognized me immediately. "It's been a while," she said warmly, leading me to a different table than the one Ryan and I had always occupied. Special occasion? Just dinner, I replied, though it was much more than that. I ordered a glass of wine, my first since before pregnancy, and a meal I actually tasted rather than merely consumed. As I sat in that restaurant where my world had shattered a year earlier, I realized how completely I had rebuilt my life from the fragments. My career had flourished, the promotion bringing new responsibilities that challenged and engaged me. My home had transformed into a haven for Lily and me, filled with laughter and the chaotic joy of baby milestones. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something more honest, if occasionally strained. And unexpected friendships had emerged from the wreckage of old relationships. Daniel had become a constant presence in our lives, his daughter Maya just 3 months older than Lily. What began as a practical arrangement for playdates had gradually evolved into something deeper. We moved cautiously, both carrying our respective histories, but the potential for something meaningful grew with each shared dinner, each family outing, each late-night conversation after the babies were asleep. On Lily's first birthday, we hosted a small celebration in our backyard. Ryan attended with his new girlfriend, a quiet architect from his firm who seemed kind and slightly uncomfortable with the complex family dynamics. My parents came bearing extravagant gifts and genuine smiles. Melissa and her family, Daniel and Maya, and friends from my prenatal yoga group completed the gathering, a chosen family assembled from both old and new connections. As I watched Lily smash her cake with delighted abandon, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for her well-being, I reflected on the lessons of the past 2 years. I had learned that family is both more fragile and more resilient than I had believed. That betrayal can destroy what you thought was unbreakable, but also clear space for something authentic to grow. That forgiveness isn't a single act, but a continuous choice to release the burden of anger, not for the betrayer's benefit, but for your own peace. Most importantly, I had learned that my capacity for love and joy wasn't diminished by pain. If anything, the experience had expanded my emotional range, allowing me to appreciate happiness more fully for having known its absence. The challenges had forced me to discover strength I never knew I possessed, resilience that would serve me through whatever life brought next. If you've ever experienced betrayal or found yourself rebuilding from unexpected devastation, I hope my story offers some comfort. The path through pain isn't linear or predictable, but healing is possible. Sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive disguised as its greatest challenges. The key is to keep moving forward, one day at a time, until you discover you've created something beautiful from what was broken. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What helped you find strength during that process? Share your experiences in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and recovery. And remember, whatever challenge you're facing right now, this too shall pass, and you may find yourself stronger on the other side. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own path to healing.